Rain lashed the streets of Fairfield like needles from the sky. At 11:46 p.m., the old lamps that lined the main road flickered under the assault of the storm. Their dim yellow glow painted distorted shadows across the soaked pavement. Tara Simmons stood at the cracked edge of the sidewalk near the Eastbrook bus stop, huddled under a blue umbrella that was already failing against the wind. Her black hoodie clung to her skin, and her sneakers squelched with each shift of her weight. Her phone buzzed in her pocket again, the 10th time since 11:30, but she didn't need to check it. She already knew it was from her sister, Mia, asking if she was okay. Asking why she hadn't come home yet. But Tara couldn't answer. Her battery was barely holding at 4%, and calling for an Uber was impossible. The app refused to load, and the roads were flooded enough that even taxis weren't running. The last bus home was supposed to arrive at 11:40 p.m., but it was already 6 minutes late, and the rain wasn't letting up. She glanced at the digital sign above the stop. The red LED screen blinked with a frustrating message, "Service delayed, inclement weather." Great. She exhaled, watching her breath mist in the cold air. No other passengers were around. No passing cars. Just the sound of raindrops hammering metal, glass, and pavement. The world felt drowned. Tara stepped under the shelter of the glass bus stop. Water still managed to drip in from above where the paneling was cracked. She sat carefully on the damp wooden bench and wrapped her arms tightly around herself. That's when she noticed something strange. She had glanced down the road out of instinct more than anything, and she saw him. A man stood about 20 feet away, just outside the halo of the flickering street lamp. He was facing the street, not moving, not even flinching in the storm. She hadn't seen him approach. He wasn't there before. He wore a dark trench coat, soaked through and clinging to his legs. A wide-brimmed black hat shadowed most of his face. He didn't have an umbrella. He just stood in the rain, motionless, as if waiting for something. Tara blinked, wiping a raindrop from her lashes. Her gut tightened. Maybe he's waiting for the bus too, she muttered under her breath, though it didn't sound convincing. She turned her eyes away, telling herself not to stare. Maybe he was harmless. Maybe he was just some old man caught in the same storm. She pulled out her phone again, praying that one bar of service might be enough to text Mia. She typed, "Still waiting. Bus late. Storm crazy. We'll be home soon." She hit send. It didn't go through. She sighed and stuffed the phone back into her hoodie. When she looked up again, her heart jolted. The man was closer. No sound. No steps. No warning. He was now only about 10 feet away, standing at the edge of the bus stop's awning. Still not speaking. Still not moving. Tara felt her fingers tense against her legs. She looked around, but there was no one else in sight. No cars. No open stores. Nothing. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me, are you waiting for the bus?" No reply. Only the rain, pounding harder now. Tara forced a nervous smile, hoping to make it clear she wasn't scared. "It's late. I think it's delayed from the rain." Still, the man didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. He stared straight ahead toward the road, shoulders hunched, hat dripping water onto the ground. Tara noticed something else then, his coat. It looked old. Not just wet, but worn. The fabric had that patchy texture of something left out in the sun too long, frayed at the edges. His shoes, visible beneath the hem of the coat, were thick leather with rusted metal buckles. The kind of shoes people didn't wear anymore. This isn't right, Tara thought. She stood slowly, her legs stiff from sitting. She edged toward the open side of the shelter, thinking she could walk back toward the gas station 3 blocks away. It was late, but maybe she could find anyone there. She took one step. The man turned his head. It was slow. Deliberate. Almost mechanical. As if the movement was being played back in reverse. Tara froze. She couldn't see his face fully, but what little she did see chilled her. Pale skin. Too pale. almost gray, and eyes that didn't seem to reflect light. They were hollow, not in a poetic way, but literally sunken. Lifeless. The man lifted his hand slightly, and something inside Tara's chest screamed for her to run. But she couldn't. She couldn't explain it, but her legs wouldn't move. It wasn't fear alone. It was like something was holding her in place, an invisible force that made the air feel heavier, like trying to breathe underwater. He took a step toward her. Only one. The sound of his foot hitting the wet concrete was impossibly loud. Like the crack of thunder. Like the scream of something ancient. Tara gasped, stumbling backward, breaking the invisible grip on her limbs. She turned and sprinted into the rain. Her umbrella was gone, left behind on the bench. Her hood flew back as wind whipped against her. She didn't look back. Not once. She ran until her lungs burned, until her soaked sneakers slipped on the sidewalk, until the lights of the gas station finally came into view. She burst through the doors, breathless, dripping, and terrified. The cashier behind the counter looked up in alarm. "You okay? You're soaked." Tara turned to look behind her. No one. Nothing. Only the endless downpour and the empty road. She stayed there for the next hour, refusing to leave, refusing to go back to that bus stop. The cashier gave her a hot cup of coffee and let her charge her phone behind the counter. When she finally got in touch with Mia, her sister drove across town to pick her up. Tara didn't say a word about the man on the way home. She couldn't. She didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. But she couldn't stop thinking about it either. The next day, unable to shake the feeling, she returned to the bus stop during daylight. The storm had passed. The sun was shining, and the streets were mostly dry again. She approached the bench cautiously. And there, scratched into the wooden backrest of the bench, were 3 words. "She saw me." Tara stepped back, heart pounding. The carving was fresh. She touched it. The wood splintered beneath her finger, as if whoever or whatever had written it didn't use a knife but something sharper, more unnatural. She reported it to the local authorities, but they chalked it up to a prank. "Kids messing around," they said. Graffiti. But it didn't feel like graffiti. Tara began researching. She dove into old town forums, historical archives, anything she could find about the area. And she found it. In 1978, a man named Gerald Kester went missing during a massive rainstorm. He was last seen at that same Eastbrook bus stop, waiting for a ride home from work. No body was found. No witnesses. Just his briefcase and a soaked fedora left on the bench. Urban legend says his spirit returns during heavy storms, searching for the ride he never got. And those who see him? He follows. Tara couldn't sleep for days. Every time the rain began, she'd check the windows. Check the front door. Listen for that slow, steady step. One rainy night a week later, she heard it. Footsteps. Just outside her bedroom window. She didn't open the curtain. She didn't need to. Because on the glass was a wet imprint. A single handprint. Smudged, gray, and unmistakably real. The rain didn't just fall that night, it poured in thick, relentless sheets, drowning out every sound but its own voice. Thunder rumbled like a beast in the sky, shaking the windows of the small ranger outpost nestled deep in the heart of Glenmere Forest. The weather report had said scattered showers. What arrived instead felt like the sky had opened its throat in grief. Jacob Moore sat alone inside the wooden ranger station. He was in his 3rd month of the overnight shift rotation and had already grown accustomed to the isolation. Glenmere wasn't a busy park during the off-season, especially not in the dead of autumn. Leaves had fallen weeks ago, blanketing the trails in rust-colored decay. Hikers had disappeared with the summer. All that remained were the skeletal trees and the silence between the storms. Normally, Jacob found peace in the quiet. The long hours gave him space to think, to breathe. He had taken the ranger job after his younger brother died last year, a hit-and-run accident that left the family in ruins. Solitude helped him manage the grief. But tonight, the silence felt wrong. It felt loaded, like the woods were holding their breath, waiting. The storm had knocked out the satellite signal hours ago. The radio only produced static. Cell service didn't exist this deep into the preserve. Jacob sat at the desk with a mug of instant coffee cooling beside his elbow. The lantern above him cast a yellow glow over the wood-paneled interior, flickering slightly with each gust of wind. His laptop blinked with the unfinished incident report from earlier that evening, a false alarm call about a missing hiker that turned out to be nothing more than a group of campers who wandered off trail and quickly returned. But something about them had unsettled him. They'd been off. Not panicked, not cold. Just blank. When Jacob asked them what had happened, none of the three could give a straight answer. One of them, a girl with a pale face and soaked hoodie, simply whispered, "He's calling again." Jacob hadn't pressed the issue. He wished he had. The clock ticked past 2 a.m. Rain beat against the metal roof in a steady rhythm. The darkness outside the windows seemed deeper than usual. He turned toward the door and paused. He thought he heard something over the rain. A knock. Soft. Barely audible. He stood. Another knock came, this one louder. Sharp. 3 precise raps, spaced evenly. Not the wild banging of someone caught in a storm. Controlled. Intentional. Jacob reached for the flashlight on the desk and clicked it on. He moved to the door and opened it slightly, shielding his eyes from the rain. A figure stood in the downpour. A woman. She wore a white dress soaked to the skin, clinging to her thin frame. Long black hair hung in wet strands around her face. Her bare feet were planted in the mud, and she stared at him with wide, unblinking eyes. Jacob opened the door wider. "Ma'am, are you okay? You're soaked. Come inside." She didn't move. He stepped forward, hesitating for a moment. The storm roared around them. He could barely hear his own voice. "You need shelter. You'll freeze out here." Still, she said nothing. Jacob reached out to her arm. Her skin was ice cold, like porcelain left outside in the snow. She flinched slightly but didn't pull away. He guided her into the cabin, closed the door, and grabbed a towel from the storage shelf near the desk. She stood in the middle of the room, dripping water onto the hardwood floor, staring at the far wall as if she were watching something no one else could see. "What's your name?" Jacob asked gently, wrapping the towel around her shoulders. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then finally, after several seconds, she whispered, "He's calling again." Jacob felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Who's calling?" he asked, trying to keep his tone calm. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, and Jacob's breath caught in his throat. Her eyes weren't just wide. They were black. Not dark. Not dilated. Pitch black. No iris, no white. Just endless void. He stepped back. She suddenly screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It didn't come from her mouth alone. It filled the room, vibrating through the walls and floorboards. The lights flickered violently. The mug on the desk shattered. Then silence. When Jacob blinked, she was gone. The room was empty. The towel lay in a soaked heap on the floor. Jacob backed toward the desk, heart racing. His hands shook as he reached for the radio again. Still static. He looked toward the door, then at the windows. Rain continued to fall. Wind howled. But outside, through the glass, he saw movement. Shapes. Figures in the woods. Dozens of them. Some walked slowly between the trees. Others stood perfectly still, facing the outpost. All pale. All barefoot. All staring with those same black eyes. Jacob stumbled back and locked the door. The air in the room had changed. It was heavier, dense like fog. The walls creaked as if under pressure. A high-pitched sound began, like the whine of an old television left on too long. He pressed his hands to his ears. The sound grew louder. Piercing. He dropped to his knees. Then, suddenly, it stopped. A voice whispered behind him. "He's here." Jacob turned. The woman stood inside again, only now her dress was dry. Her skin no longer pale. Her eyes now normal. She smiled faintly. "You heard the rain," she said. "Didn't you?" Jacob couldn't respond. His mouth wouldn't work. She crouched beside him. "They always do. At first." She pressed her fingers gently against his temple. Then they joined him. He passed out. When Jacob woke, morning light streamed through the windows. The storm had passed. He was alone. Everything inside the outpost looked untouched. The desk was clean. The mug, unbroken. The towel, folded neatly on the shelf. No sign of the woman. No footprints. Nothing. He rushed outside. No figures. No signs in the mud. No broken branches. Nothing out of place. Had it all been a dream? Jacob returned inside and opened the incident log. He hesitated, then began writing. 2:07 a.m. Unknown visitor. Female. Referred to someone or something calling in the rain. Disappeared without explanation. May require further psychological evaluation. He stopped typing. The screen flickered. Words appeared slowly, as if typed by unseen hands. He called you, too. The laptop shut off. Jacob stood slowly and walked to the mirror in the restroom. He stared at his reflection. His eyes were normal. But his ears. He leaned closer. Blood. A faint trickle from both ears. He didn't sleep the next night. Or the night after. Every time it rained, he heard things. Whispers. Names. Sometimes he saw the woman outside, watching from the trees. Then came the night he stepped outside. He didn't remember doing it. He simply opened the door and walked into the rain. When he came to, he was kneeling in a shallow pool near the trail's edge, miles from the outpost. He had no idea how long he'd been there. His hands were muddy. His clothes soaked. But he felt calm. Peaceful. Too peaceful. He never reported the incident. But he knew something had changed. The next few shifts passed quietly. The sun stayed out. The air turned crisp with winter's approach. But Jacob no longer trusted the silence. It felt like the calm before something much worse. On the final night of his rotation, the forecast predicted light rain. By midnight, it was pouring again. He sat in the dark, lights off, just listening. And when he heard the knock, he didn't flinch. He opened the door without hesitation. The woman stood there once more. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Figures lined the tree line behind her, stretching endlessly into the woods. Each with black eyes. Each smiling. Each waiting. She held out her hand. Jacob took it. And stepped into the rain. They say the ranger who took over Jacob's post never met him. The last entry in the station's logbook was dated the night of the storm. It read only one sentence. He's calling again. No one ever saw Jacob Moore again. But during heavy storms in Glenmere Forest, hikers sometimes report a man in a soaked uniform standing just off the trail. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He simply waits. And listens. It started with a voice. Faint, impossible, yet unmistakably real. I was 15 when I first heard it. It had rained heavily that evening in our quiet little neighborhood on the edge of Fairhaven. The kind of rain that turned streets into streams and curbs into rivers. Water gushed into the storm drains like miniature waterfalls. My bike tires splashed through puddles as I raced home, trying to beat the last light of day. The voice came from beneath me. Not above. Not beside. Beneath. I had stopped at the corner near Hemlock Drive. I remember that spot because of the way the street lamp flickered just above it. I'd waited there, checking the time, wondering if Mom would already be furious. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Hey. It came from the storm drain to my right. I froze. Rain still poured, masking sound. But I was certain of it. I stepped closer, cautiously peering into the wide, dark mouth of the drain. Nothing. Just the gurgling of runoff and the soft reflection of the flickering light above. But then it came again. Down here. I jumped back. No one else was around. No footsteps. No cars. Just me, the rain, and that whisper. I forced a laugh. Told myself I was hearing things. Maybe the water echoing oddly. Maybe a trick of sound through the grates. I got back on my bike and pedaled away, faster than before, pretending I wasn't scared. But I never forgot that night. 2 weeks later, a boy from my school went missing. Elliot Crane. A quiet kid. Liked books more than people. Walked home alone most days. They found his backpack 2 blocks from where I'd heard the voice. It was sitting neatly beside a storm drain. No struggle. No evidence. No Elliot. No one connected the 2 events. Except me. But I kept quiet. Years passed. I moved on. Or at least, I tried. The memory faded, buried under school, part-time jobs, and late-night movies. I graduated, moved out, and took up night shifts at a local 24-hour gas station to pay for college. Life moved forward, steady and unremarkable. Until it rained again. Not just any rain. A storm, much like that one all those years ago. I was driving home after a long shift, windshield wipers barely keeping up. Streets flooded. Traffic lights blinked uselessly. My route took me past Hemlock Drive. I hadn't thought of that street in years. But as I slowed at the intersection, I noticed something. The storm drain. It looked different. The metal grate was cleaner. Newer. Like it had been replaced recently, though the rest of the curb was old and cracked. My headlights passed over it for only a second, but something shifted in my stomach. I pulled over. I don't know why. Curiosity. Dread. Maybe guilt. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk, letting rain soak my jacket and drip into my shoes. I stood above the drain and looked down. Hey! It wasn't possible. I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest. I glanced around. No one nearby. Houses dark. Street empty. I leaned closer. Down here. The same voice. Almost musical in its softness. Not urgent. Not threatening. Inviting. I should have left. I should have run. But something compelled me to kneel, to place a hand against the wet, rusted grate and peer into the darkness below. That's when I saw the eyes. 2 small, glinting orbs in the shadows. Not glowing, not animalistic. Just human. Watching. Waiting. I scrambled back. Fell onto the wet street. My breath came in shallow gasps. I stared at the drain, expecting something to emerge. But nothing moved. The water continued to pour, washing leaves and debris into the darkness. The eyes had vanished. The voice didn't speak again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I did some research. I looked up storm drain schematics. Maps of the Fairhaven water system. Most of it was a forgotten network, built in the 1950s, barely maintained. It stretched for miles beneath the city. I cross-referenced Elliot's disappearance with others over the years. There were more. Not many. Just enough to notice if you were looking. 3 in the 80s. One in 1996. Another in 2008. All children. All vanished during storms. All last seen near storm drains. The coincidences piled up. And with them, a terrifying theory. What if something lived down there? Something old. Something hungry. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Not yet. Who would believe me? A night shift college kid chasing urban legends? But I couldn't let it go. So I started going back. Every time it rained, I returned to Hemlock Drive. Sometimes I waited hours. Nothing happened. No whispers. No eyes. Just water and wind. But on the fifth night, I heard it again. Hey. This time, I spoke back. Who are you? Silence. I leaned closer. Where are you? The voice replied, softer this time. Below. I shivered. Why are you down there? To wait. For what? No response. Then, barely audible, company. I left immediately. That word stuck with me. Company. It didn't sound like a threat. More like a plea. The next storm came a week later. I brought a flashlight. I told myself I wouldn't go further than the edge. Just a glance. A peek. I removed the grate. The tunnel sloped downward into blackness. Cold air rose from it, smelling of wet stone and something older. Something decayed. I shined my light inside. The beam barely pierced the darkness. I called out. Hello? No answer. I climbed in. It was stupid. Reckless. But part of me needed to know. Needed to see. I crouched and crawled forward, the water splashing around my hands and knees. The tunnel curved left, then dropped slightly. The light flickered. My breath echoed. Then I saw the footprints. Small. Bare. They led deeper. I followed. The tunnel widened slightly, revealing a chamber. Broken toys lay scattered in the water. A teddy bear. A doll missing one eye. A rusted tricycle leaned against the far wall. And in the center, standing silently, was a boy. Elliot. He hadn't aged. He turned slowly toward me. His eyes were glassy. His skin pale. You heard it, he whispered. What is it? I asked, stepping closer. He didn't answer. Behind him, something stirred. A shape. Tall. Thin. Crawling along the ceiling. Its limbs were long, too jointed. Its face was a blur of features, constantly shifting. It opened its mouth, and I heard every whisper I'd ever ignored. Every doubt. Every fear. Every regret. I screamed. The boy grabbed my hand. Run. We ran together. Water splashed. Shadows followed. The tunnel closed behind us as we reached the entrance. I climbed out, dragging Elliot with me. Only he wasn't there anymore. Just water. Just rain. I sat in the street for an hour, staring at the empty drain. I never found that chamber again. But I remember everything. Now, whenever it rains, I stay awake. I listen. And I wait for the whispers. Because I know they're still down there. And one day, they'll call again.